After reading and viewing the materials and participating in our class, you'll be able to define social emotional learning, identify social emotional competencies, and discuss how to support social emotional learning and development. The readings you should focus on this week include Weisberg 2016 and Vega 2017. Both are located on our Blackboard site. If you have time, it'd be worthwhile for you to skim Thompson 2018, pages 201 to 235. As you review the presentation, you're going to notice there are several videos embedded for you to review, including Social Emotional Learning Explained, 5 Keys to Social Emotional Learning Success, and 60-Second Strategy, Appreciation, Apology, and AHA. I want to share a few reminders to help you organize yourself and manage the demands of your coursework for this semester. Remember to always begin with the weekly PowerPoint presentations provided. They're going to guide you through the materials. Have your reading successful so that you can read, reflect, and respond as you're going through the presentation. The readings serve as the foundation of your learning as you apprentice into becoming a professional. Most of the readings are research-based, so it's critical that you're engaging in the readings each week, along with the videos and materials provided. Do be mindful that each week there are also additional resources on the various topics provided. These are resources that can help you to further explain the topics or demonstrate how they might be taken up as practice in different kinds of contexts. If you have materials that you think would be good to share with others, please pass them along to me. Each week there's a discussion board forum provided that asks you to check in. So this early check-in builds community. It also supports our social emotional learning. Then it also asks to respond to prompts that connect the topics, readings, and your experiences. As you're responding to those, make sure you're using the readings to back up your ideas. So source your ideas using the readings that are part of what we've done that week. That's just good practice, but it's also important for others to see that what you say has a research base behind it. So there are many discussion board forums that can directly connect to your classroom management plan. So the questions we're asking you aren't only to reflect on your reading, but it's to help you start to summarize some of the ideas we're going to ask you to put in that classroom management plan portfolio. So work smarter, not harder. Use these. Reach out if you have any questions about our course or the content. Okay, some social norms for this class include being respectful of each other in the different ways that we engage in our work together, like through the discussion board posts and responses. Keep an open mind and be open to new perspectives. Different people bring different experiences, different ways of thinking and viewing the world. It's important that we actively listen to each other and try to understand each other's perspective. Be present and support each other as we move through the semester together. This is a semester like no other. It's demanding in terms of coursework and in terms of practice. What you're learning is the foundation of your professional practice, the baseline of knowledge of what you need to know in order to begin to be an effective educator. Please take these opportunities to learn seriously and always engage. You are going into classrooms and working with students. There is great responsibility in that. Also, just know that there's going to be times during the semester where you feel overwhelmed and stressed, even more than you've had in any other semester. Let's work to support each other through that. We'll all feel that way at some point. Make sure you're asking questions and engage with the materials and each other. Again, this is coursework to prepare you for the field. You have to show up and be prepared to do the work and engage in professional and thoughtful ways. Finally, strive for inclusivity. Ensure that we're holding each other accountable to creating spaces where all voices are invited to be shared and heard. Before we delve into the topic for this week, I also want to address a concept that we're going to be talking about across the semester, core practices. You might hear me refer to them as CPs, or some professors might call them high leverage practices. Core practices are a critical part of the redesign of all teacher prep programs in the state of Michigan. So this new turn in the state's teacher preparation programs, which you're a part of at Grand Valley, include the integration of core practices to ensure that all teacher candidates, regardless of where you're coming from, understand how to take up important teacher moves in the classroom. Deborah Ball and Francesca Forzani, who are researchers at U of M, have widely studied and implemented core practices into their teacher prep program. Here's what they have to say about core practices. Skillful teaching requires appropriate using and integrating specific moves and activities in particular cases and contexts, based on knowledge and understanding of one's pupils and on the application of professional judgment. And they've identified 19 different practices that are essential to the work of teaching. Simply put, core practices are aspects of teaching practice or teacher moves that are essential to how we teach in all classrooms and skills that teacher candidates can do in their first years of teaching so they have better success in working with students. Again, Teaching Works, which is affiliated with U of M, has identified 19 different practices that all teachers should know how to do. And the Michigan Department of Education agrees and has required that all teacher prep programs consider how these practices are taught to our teacher candidates. So I've included a link here to Teaching Works website for you to view. In this course, EDI 310, there are 6 practices that directly connect to our content. Core teaching practice number 5, implementing norms and routines for classroom discourse and work. CTP number 7, specifying and reinforcing productive student behavior. Number 8, implementing organization routines. 9, setting up and managing small group work. 10, respectful relationships. And 11, talking about a student with families. Some of these practices will be discussed explicitly in this course, and others will be infused in the readings and materials. The larger goal is that you're aware of the importance of these practices and that you can successfully engage in these practices with your students. In the course syllabus, I've identified the topics that coincide with the practices. This might be useful for you in your classroom management plan portfolio, so kind of keep that in mind. We're gonna explore these specific practices across the semester. So again, as you were thinking about your classroom management plan, website, portfolio, whatever you want to call it, keep these in mind because our rubric is tied to these core practices. Okay, so before you read, think about the following. True or false? Teachers are only responsible for teaching students content. 2, what kind of things should teachers know about their learners? And 3, how can teaching and learning about emotions and social skills support youth learning? Now, after you've reflected a little bit about those questions and how you feel going in, read Vega 2017 located on Blackboard, and then continue to review the PowerPoint. Social emotional learning, or SEL, what you might have heard it referred to, is bringing in attention awareness to the social and emotional aspects of learning. Specifically, CASEL, or Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, a leading consortium, clearly identifies 5 areas that children and adults should further be developing with regard to social emotional learning. First is self-awareness, or the ability to understand and manage one's emotions. The second is self-management, or how we can set and achieve positive goals within our lives. This is followed by social awareness. This deals with feelings and showing empathy for others. Fourth category is relationship skills, which establishes and maintains positive relationships. And finally, they've identified responsible decision making, which of course refers to making responsible decisions. You'll also notice on this slide a hyperlink to CASEL. I definitely recommend that you click on the link and review some of the sources provided. There's a video there. There's a lot of other links out. It's an excellent resource to be familiar with. Review this brief video here as well that explains SEL in a nutshell. I wanted to also share this graphic from CASEL that again outlines the 5 SEL competencies and offers a much more nuanced definition on which each of the category entails. So spend a few moments familiarizing yourself with the different categories. Toward the end of the presentation, you're going to view a video that demonstrates how these competencies can be taken up in classrooms with students at different age levels and in different content areas. There's been a strong movement to better integrate restorative practices and social emotional curriculum into our schools to prevent and respond to varying behavioral issues that we find in our school communities. But why SEL? Research clearly demonstrates that children and adults alike can't process and retain new information if their brains are overwhelmed with anxiety. The image provided on this slide shows 2 examples of a brain and how the different parts of an unstressed brain function and correlate versus how a stressed brain functions and correlates to other areas, if it's correlating at all. What we do know is that students are stressed and are functioning within a larger global society that is also stressed. Some of the current most significant stressors include all things related to the pandemic and the stress surrounding with folks' health. Many of my former students, for example, lost family members, grandparents, aunts and uncles, even parents to COVID. For some folks, this stress may be a consequence of unwanted long-term social isolation. For others, it could be food instability. So that's when students don't know where their next meal will come from. For others, it might result from poverty or unstable home environments, moving from place to place, or not even having a home at all. And for others, it might just be related to social unrest surrounding social justice and larger societal inequities. These stressors represent a very small sampling of things students might feel overwhelmed by, anxious about, or just stressed out from. So think back to our first week of class and last week when we discussed the historical trends in classroom management. Thinking about classroom management as a part of our daily instruction, there are clear connections and benefits between SEL and classroom instruction. By intentionally and strategically integrating SEL into our daily lessons and classroom environment, we can leverage this to build, strengthen, and support positive and meaningful relationships with peers, families, and teachers. These positive relationships among the different stakeholders are crucial because positive relationships can support learning and negative relationships can hinder it, leading to devastating consequences for some students. Some direct benefits of SEL include improved attitudes and behaviors, better academic performance, less negative behaviors, and reduced emotional stress. All right, let's take a moment to stop and think. Let's go back to the question on the before you read slide. After reading and viewing the materials, now do you believe it to be true or false? Teachers are only responsible for teaching students content. Why or why not? I do hope that you're now beginning to understand that regardless of the age and content level, teachers never solely teach content. There's always a social and emotional dimension to teaching and learning in a classroom, whether it's acknowledged or not. Now, please read Weisberg 2016. This is also located on Blackboard, and then continue to review the PowerPoint. Many schools are beginning to implement different SEL models, regardless if they're elementary, middle, or high schools. There are documented benefits to quality SEL programs for students at all ages. Some of the practices will be consistently used across all levels and content areas, while other practices will be adapted, modified, or unique to any given grade level. Generally speaking, quality SEL programs involve training teachers to deliver explicit lessons that proactively teach social and emotional skills. Quality programs also ensure that there are different kinds of opportunities for students to reinforce the use of social and emotional skills throughout the day. This is needed. It's important to note that in some levels, like middle school or high school, for example, teachers might work to develop specific lessons that connect to the respective content areas. It's important to know that many models exist, and they are implemented to varying degrees. This depends on administrative support and insistence, teacher buy-in, or if they believe it's worthwhile, and how these models are received by students. Take a moment to review the graphic provided that looks at areas where different SEL approaches manifest and explore the short-term outcomes as well as the larger behavioral and academic goals. So, what does this mean for you as a classroom teacher? One important thing to remember when implementing SEL models to support social and emotional learning is that you must consider how you are growing your classroom learning environment. Be very intentional and deliberate about establishing a risk-free environment where students are invited to take chances and be vulnerable in their learning. This means moving past being right and considering the process of coming to our answers, supporting students and putting their ideas out there, and welcoming all types of engagement. This also means that you consider how you create a culturally relevant classroom. This term means that you're putting students, their needs, and their knowledge in the spotlight and considering all of the resources they bring with them and building from those resources. Some people call this their students' funds of knowledge. So the curriculum should always include the background of the students you serve and be relevant and meaningful to who they are as cultural beings. One final consideration is thinking about integrating mindfulness to support you and your students. These practices can be taken up in many different kinds of ways, from brain breaks to stretching to meditation moments. There are many different ways to bring mindfulness to your learners. I do think it's important to consider how you engage in mindfulness yourself, which is also needed, so that you can pass along what you know and benefit from the practice. Kindly note that Thompson 2018 and the extra resources section of this week's module have many other ideas on how this might be taken up in practice. Also, take a few minutes to review the video provided on the 5 keys to social and emotional success for an important recap on SEL and how these practices are taken up at different levels. Okay, let's stop and think again. What are some activities that promote SEL in the classroom? What might this look like at your grade level and content area? After you've taken a moment to reflect, Take a few minutes to skim Thompson 2018 for additional ideas that support the whole child and SEL. The Whole Child Initiative began in 2007 to shift conversations about the educational needs of students. Specifically, work surrounding the Whole Child Initiative moved from a very narrow definition of academic achievement and what that entails to approaches of education that focus on all of the needs of students, not academic needs alone, and how this can be accomplished and sustained in educational settings. Clearly, this is a work in progress to this day, but the whole child tenets per ASCD, or the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, an organization with a core mission that centers on the whole child, include the following. Each student enters the school healthy and learns about and practices a healthy lifestyle. Each student learns in an environment that is physically and emotionally safe for students and adults. Each student is actively engaged in learning and connected to the school and broader community. Each student has access to personalized learning and is supported by qualified caring adults. And finally, each student is challenged academically and prepared for success in college or further study and for employment and participation in a global environment. This slide has links to resources that are going to help you better understand the Whole Child Initiative and SEL. Spend a couple moments perusing the sites and simply becoming familiar with the resources. This slide contains a link to perhaps one of my favorite videos, 60-second strategy, appreciation, apology, aha. Take a moment to review it. It's important to make a connection to your CMP here. The activity represented in this video is an example of a community building activity. If you've explored the requirements for the classroom management plan, you will know that you will create a page that centers on building community within your classroom, and 10 community building activities are required for this page. If you found this activity modified to meet your students' needs if needed, as something you might consider using with your students in your future classroom, include it on your community building page of the CMP. Also remember, there are notes sheets provided for each page of the CMP. These notes pages are provided to help you keep track of potential ideas for your CMP. Go to the folder on Blackboard where the classroom management project is, and you will see all of the note pages. So make sure you're looking at those and kind of keep them at the front of your mind as you're going through the course. So as you go through the course, you'll actually be remembering what you should be picking up and adding to your classroom management plan in real time, so you don't need to go back into it later. Okay, assignment prep for this week. Your discussion board, as always, is due by midnight on Thursday. That's your initial post, which should be around 300 words. Make sure you're responding to both the check-in piece of the prompt and the more content related question. And then you also have 2 responses. So you need to respond to 2 of your classmates by Sunday at midnight, and those should be around 150 words each. For your teacher interview, you really need to establish a time when you're going to connect with your cooperating or mentor teacher. So this assignment's due at the end of week 4, which week 4 is next week. So if you haven't had this conversation yet, that's fine, but hopefully your teacher, your cooperating teacher knows it's coming and you have a plan for it. And for the student case study, you should be starting to really think about which participant this is going to be. If you haven't talked to your CT yet about this, you really should, because that person will have a much better idea of who's in their classroom since they've been in there all year, and they might have some really good advice about who to choose. And finally, your classroom management plan. I'm going to review the sites you posted, and once they're due on this Sunday, and then I am going to make sure I can access it and all the links within it. If you do have any questions about the classroom management plan, please reach out to me. I can always hop on a Zoom to walk you through something, but don't languish. Make sure you are actively getting things done. I am very happy to help, so please reach out if you do need that help. What you do need to start thinking about now that you have your site started is how you might start your philosophy page. So remember, it's not a philosophy of education. This is a philosophy of classroom management. So there will be some overlap, but it's not going to be the same thing. So make sure you're reading the requirements and the notes pages. You can find those all on Blackboard. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, just email me, or we can set up a Zoom meeting if you need. If you have questions, it's likely others might have those same questions. So I love it when people ask a good question, or when they remind me that something might be unclear, because it really helps me make the class more clear for others. So sometimes I respond to you directly, but sometimes if it's a really great question and it's something I think everyone needs, I'll respond with an announcement, so everyone gets that same information. You may have seen that happen a couple times last week already. So thank you for those of you who did reach out with questions, because it helped everybody in the class get a more clear idea of what's needed from them.